hello to democracy!
Hey, welcome back to The Short Game, the show where we talk about short video games, the kind that you can pick up in a day or a weekend and have a great quality experience.
We're recording in a little bit of a different circumstance than usual. First off, you can probably tell that our sound sounds a little different.
You might be hearing some strange lack of editing and overtalk here, and that's because Raygan and I are in the same place for once.
On the same mic. Kind of neat.
We are, yes. So thank you so much for visiting me here in sunny Houston, Texas, where it is
really hot
beautiful, balmy, 90 degrees.
It's way over 90. It's like 95 degrees in the shade right now.
That's pretty hot. That's the Texas heat for you. But at
Work-
least it's a
work-
humid heat.
Mm-hmm. Well, work brought me to Houston this week, and that's been kind of exciting because I get to play games in person with Shane. So naturally, the first thing we did was play a whole bunch of Towerfall, but the second thing we did,
As is our tradition.
Towerfall is a terrific game, but the second thing we did is boot up some Helldivers on the PlayStation 4, and that's the game we're going to be talking about this week.
Yeah, I've been kind of pushing for this one, just between Raygan and I, and that's mainly been held off for this long because this is not the sort of game that we would traditionally feature on the Short Game.
We've been saying that a lot lately.
We have been breaking all of our rules, that's right.
Yeah, last week we talked about the Legend of Zelda, which is a little too long for our show typically.
15 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty short for a Zelda game. And then the week before that, we talked about Hearthstone, another competitive online game, which is not usually in our wheelhouse. But I think the key unifying thing here is these are games that respect your time, games that are simple to pick up for somebody who doesn't have hours to commit. I think the most important thing for a game that we would feature is that you don't spend the first 10 hours of playing the game waiting to get to the good part.
This is a game where the good part is playing online with friends, and it gets you right to that. So
Immediately.
If you have any friends that are playing it, of course, but maybe some new friends. Because the main reason I wanted to talk about this game is that I think it really incentivizes good group online play. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I haven't experienced a whole lot of. I've tried a lot of online games that get popular, and I've found myself driven away from online play and back to single player a lot because you have to invest so much time to get good enough to not be constantly cursed out.
Yeah, and you're playing on other people's time.
Yeah, and you're screwing the game up for the real players is how it feels.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into why this game is so successful at giving everybody that plays it a good online experience, if you haven't seen Helldivers before, and you could be excused for missing it because it's not been all that heavily marketed.
I have tried to tell a lot of people about this game, and I don't think anyone that I've mentioned it to has actually known about it.
Yeah.
A shout out to Joe, because he mentioned it on Twitter, and I was like, oh, at least one other person that I theoretically know, internet friend of a friend, is aware of this game.
Yeah, but not many of our real life friends have been playing this game.
My wife is playing it though. Julia loves this game.
Oh, that's awesome.
When she and I sit down to play a game lately, this is the one.
Against her a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we never play
alongside her.
Yes. So yeah, and that's it. Kind of comes back to there's a short list of types of games, like kind of mechanically, that my wife and I really, really love to play together, and one of them is a dual stick shooter, and this is a dual stick shooter. It's from Swedish developer Arrowhead, who made the Magika games, which you, Raygan, tried to get me into for a while.
Yeah, Magika is a really, really interesting game. Magika was the first game from Arrowhead, and I played it on the PC. I know there are console versions of it, I think. Mm-hmm. Its sequel is coming out pretty soon here, but...
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, but it did two things that were really, really interesting. First off, it's 4 players, online, cooperative, playing their way through short missions, and that's very similar to Helldivers, as we'll be talking about. But the two things that really stood out about it are it allows, and in fact doesn't allow you to disable friendly fire. So there's this sort of very... your games are almost constant havoc of players killing each other, which actually is pretty funny and fun and kind of part of the environment of the game. And it also has this really interesting system of spellcasting where rather than just click to shoot or whatever, there's a kind of a complex combo system where each spell that you cast, you have to type out on the keyboard a combination of letters, and so you have a key on your keyboard that means beam versus area of effect. You've got keys to represent whether this is going to be an ice spell or a fire spell or what have you. And there's at least 8 buttons that are involved. And then once you've dialed in your spell, then you click to actually fire it off. And so theoretically,
that was why it was too hard for me.
Yeah, it was actually
so
really
many.
hard. Yeah, it was really hard because there's literally every time you fire off a spell, you had to punch in between like 3 and 10 characters on the keyboard in order to program what spell you were going to cast next. What that really meant was people who got very good at the game could do fascinating things. And there were a ton of really interesting spells. And you could even kind of improvise with the spells because there was a kind of a predictable system to it. But what it meant was that for a newcomer into that game, you were
impenetrable.
It was really, really difficult.
It was tough.
Yeah. This game, they've really dialed that back while still keeping what made that core kind of complexity interesting. Helldivers, you are just sort of shooting. You've got your basic gun. You've got a like a pistol. You've got a more advanced gun.
The pistol is only used when you have one or more hands in. You can't be using a two-handed weapon. So
right.
if you fall on the ground or if you're picking up an object to try and complete an objective, like grabbing a bag and carrying it from point A to point B. So the pistol's almost unimportant.
It's a sidearm, but
it is good to upgrade it if you want. But it's a game where you're completing missions, and each mission consists of a number of objectives. And so it's going to drop you alone or you with as many people as you want to allow into your game from the internet.
Up to 4. Well,
up to
3
4.
plus you.
Yeah, 3 plus you. And it's going to give you the same screen co-op experience. Now, that's the first thing that is key for me and Julia really enjoying it, is that same screen co-op dual stick shooters. It's a genre that there's not a whole lot of big budget, big name games in. I guess it's somewhat similar to a Diablo type game in that you're moving around.
Kind of,
and it's but more of a kind of a controller specific, because it's a dual stick shooter. If this were on a computer, it would probably control something like a Diablo. But the same screen co-op, that's important.
And it's same screen even if you're playing over the internet, which is really interesting. You
forces you to keep the group together.
Yeah, you can't wander off on your own and get killed. And the more inexperienced players are going to kind of naturally follow the more experienced players to objectives because everybody has to stay together. There's no like chain that's holding you together exactly. But
yeah, ultimately, if 3 people go one way and one just stands still, he's going to get pushed off the screen and basically die.
Yeah. But dying isn't a big deal in this game. People die all the time. You're going to die from friendly fire a bunch because all of the guns do incredibly large amounts of damage, even to your
It's
your
mega
teammates.
chaotic. You're going to blow yourself up with grenades. You're going to summon a hell pod to drop a stratagem, like you want to get an upgraded gun or something, and that's going to land right on top of your head. You're going to be about to evacuate, and you're going to be standing in the wrong place, and the evacuation transport ship is going to drop on you.
Yeah.
So there's a million ways to die, and that doesn't even mention any of the enemies who are all out there to kill you, and they are without number, streaming towards you at all times. So it's a highly chaotic game, but it's also probably the game where the best online multiplayer kind of synergy has happened, and I wanted to talk about that in particular.
Yeah. Well, before we talk about why this game is so great at its online, I mean, they've made some incredibly smart choices to make the online experience fun for everybody. But it's also just a funny and weird and quirky game for this style. The world of the game is you are a Helldiver, which is a one-man army type of character. It's very much like Starship Troopers or Aliens. So these are, marine types that drop from the sky in these hell pods onto planets of the enemies of Super Earth. And it's this very sort of, the world is a managed democracy.
You're spreading managed democracy. Yes, that's right. You're serving up a hot glass of liberty.
Oh, God. They make that pun actually a little bit too often.
They seem to have toned that one down in the expansion. So
good.
Yeah, that was great.
Well, there's So it's very funny. It's if you've ever seen Starship Troopers, you'll already instantly know the world of the game. The world of the game is really only something you see in the intro, but it does have this kind of...
a little bit in the kind of universal map. There's a lot of little events that happen.
Yeah, and the map of the game is interesting too, because while you're playing this out in a bunch of very short sequences, little missions, each mission is clear some things on this planet. So you'll drop onto a planet that is part of one of the 3 fronts of the Galactic War. And the Galactic War is between Super Earth and 3 alien races. There's the cyborgs, which kind of have a communist kind of... Well, at least Super Earth thinks that they're communist because they're cyborgs.
Yes. There's the communist cyborgs. There's the bugs who live somewhere where there's lots of oil. Yes. I think they produce oil from their bodies. And
kill them all.
Yeah. And then there's the Illuminates, which are kind of like... they reminded me of the Protoss from their high-tech.
Yeah.
They're an advanced race with psychic powers. And they are obviously our enemy because they probably have weapons of mass destruction.
Probably.
Yeah, I would say it seems like they ought to, right? So we probably ought to kill them all.
Yeah. So your map of the galactic conflict is Super Earth at the center, and spreading out towards these 3 other races' homeworlds are different zones, and each zone has 3 planets in it. No, exactly.
They have any number of planets. They can have somewhere between... as few as 2, or I think as many as 5.
Yeah, and
depending on the difficulty level.
And each one of the zones has, Super Earth controls it to some degree or other. So either Super Earth has completely conquered it, or it's completely owned by the alien race or whatever. All this barely matters in terms of the actual gameplay, but there's this really interesting meta game, the Galactic Conflict, where we're on what now?
Galactic War number 4. Yes.
So since the launch of the game, there have been 4 Galactic Wars. And there's this sort of metagame where when you're deciding which planet to go and kill bugs or whatever on, you're deciding to, advance the front on one of these 3 fronts. And the community as a whole is either progressing the war or losing the war. And as I understand it, we lost the first Galactic War, and then we won the second one. And
I started in the second Galactic War, and that was awesome because we won. And I got a special cape for having participated. And then I think we lost the third Galactic War because I didn't help out enough.
Yeah, it was your fault.
And then I think we're going to win Galactic War number 4.
It really looks like
we've got them. We've already beaten the Illuminates. And they've got the bugs on the ropes, I think.
Yep. So it's a really kind of an interesting little meta game to kind of keep you involved. Those Galactic Wars progress over weeks and weeks, and your contribution to it is usually, almost unnoticeably tiny, but it does feel like you're kind of part of something that's happening in the larger game.
Yeah, it does. It does affect what missions you play, also, because not only are you, conceivably wanting to choose one that's going to be beneficial to all of humanity. Theoretically, but once an enemy has been completely overwhelmed, their missions are no longer available for the remainder of the war. So right now, as it stands, the Illuminates have been conquered, and so I can't pick up any Illuminate missions. And so I actually the Illuminates are my favorite bad guy to kill.
Must be a lot of people's.
I guess they must be a lot of people's favorite bad guy to kill because they're so cool. They've got a lot of snipers and things like that. So instead, I've been fighting the commies, the robots.
Yeah, the cyborgs.
Cyborgs, thank you. Yeah, they're commies to me. So the main reason I wanted to talk about this game, the thing that I think is most interesting about it, is it's really hard to set up a system in which you throw a bunch of random internet strangers together and they're able to actually complete some goals that you put out in front of them. It's all about putting the right incentives in front of those people, right?
Yeah.
So this game does that really, really well. I've really enjoyed playing it with people that I know because in any game, if I've got people that I'm really willing to work together with, I'll have fun and we'll manage to, tear it up. But in this game, even when I'm playing with 3 complete strangers who don't even have their chat enabled, or sometimes do, I tend to have a really good experience playing online with just people from the lobbies. And it has to do with the way that they've laid out all of the different rewards, the things that they reinforce.
A lot of online games, your players kind of break down into three groups. There's the people who are there to really play the game and complete missions or whatever it is. There's people who kind of don't understand the game yet, newbies, or people who just simply aren't very good, like me probably, or people who are otherwise going to be kind of a weight on an otherwise active game. And then there's griefers or douchebags. There's people who are going to actively fuck it up for other people. Excuse my French.
Yeah, and this game, in a way, I mean, it forces everyone to be a griefer and a douchebag because friendly fire is on and you're being forced to stand very close together with shotguns.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it never puts... I never feel like this game... I'm not sure I can totally put my finger on exactly why, and we'll talk about some of the ways this game is different from other online co-op or competitive games, but I've never had a situation where somebody joined my game that I wanted to boot.
I have, but it's once, and I've played a lot of this game. I'm close to level 20 now, so and that was originally the level cap. So I'm almost there. I know that you can get up to level 25 now with the expansion that they've released, but that's for discussing later, I guess. The first thing that I noticed when I first started up the game was I started the game up in one-player mode. And one-player mode is fine. If you die when you're the only player, you're going to reinforce automatically. You're going to get brought back, and it's going to drop your little hell pod on the heads of some of the enemies that killed you. Very in a very satisfying way. But you have among your stratagems that you can choose from.
So talk about
SOS.
Stratagems first. The stratagem,
yes.
is
so mention a stratagem. I'll explain a stratagem. This game. Yeah. So whereas those the previous game Magika had spells, this game has technologies that you can summon by punching in a code. Basically, you bring up a small menu, and from the I think 4 stratagems that you've picked to carry with you. You can punch in the code for any one of them.
Now, the code is really interesting. So
Up,
you
down,
have to
left,
stop
right.
what you're doing in order to summon a stratagem.
Still, yes.
So your character model goes prone or kind of like kneels or something and is like punching in a code on his little device or whatever. And
some of the codes are short. Some of the codes are long. So some of my favorite stratagems, the ones I use all the time, I've chosen them not just because they do awesome things, but because they have a short code. Something that I can do like up, left, up, right, and that summons a drone for me. That's easy. Some of the ones that do some really awesome stuff, they have a long code, like up, down, right, left, right, up, down, right, left. And you can see it on screen, but you have to do it perfectly in order to use the stratagem.
Yeah, if you don't, you have to start it over.
Exactly.
It just sort of means that in order to pull off one of these things, it's not just a simple button press. It's something that your character has to be safe, or at least make yourself vulnerable to being attacked for at least a few seconds while you're firing this thing off.
Yeah. You can get faster, though, with it. You can get practiced.
Yeah. But it's never completely unapproachable like some of the more complex Magika spells.
So back to the how it incentivizes co-op with this. The first one that you're going to need to learn is the reinforce stratagem. And that's how if someone who is on your team, if you have a teammate die, they're not going to come back until you use the reinforced stratagem. And if nobody uses the reinforced stratagem, then you're going to lose as soon as everybody's dead, because the mission ends when everyone dies. So you can bring all those dead people back. Doing that stratagem one time brings back everybody that's dead, and that's the first clue that you have that you're really going to need to work together.
Yeah, so you don't automatically come back when there's no number of lives that you have. If you can die an unlimited number of times in the game as long as there's still one person in your group left to bring you back.
You can even, if you are on the ground and you have been like beaten so badly that if you're hit hard, then you're going to fall down and you might be kind of crawling away. As you crawl away, if you manage to get the code in for the reinforced stratagem and then you die, it falls out of your hand and everybody gets brought back.
Awesome.
So being able to quickly punch in that one stratagem is extremely important to the game in terms of cooperation. And so everybody's going to be doing this. And the stratagems continue as you learn kind of the basics to reinforce cooperation. So one of them is ammo drops.
Yeah. So So dying is not a big deal at all, but bringing people back from the dead is a big deal. It happens constantly in this game. You have to resummon your teammates. And because it's something that your teammates are doing, you can't reinforce yourself. You know that these other people that are playing the game with you are your only way of being reinforced. They have to bring you back if you die, and you have to do the same for them. And I think just that little bit of understanding that these are the people that if you're pissing them off or trying to leave them behind or otherwise being a jerk, then they won't reinforce you. And because of that, I think people kind of intuit that they have to cooperate on this game, even people that maybe wouldn't be great at cooperating on other games.
Mm-hmm. And the stratagems continue to kind of make you want to work together, or at least reward you for working together. When you get ammo, it gives you more ammo than you can possibly carry. It's always encouraging you to share. And then late game, there's some strategies that really encourage you to work together, like there's a weapon that you can use that comes with a backpack full of ammo. It's like an anti-tank rifle, the recoilless rifle. And when it drops with a gun and a backpack that you can carry. But if the person you're playing with, they grab the backpack, they can reload you while you fire, and together you can fire these like anti-tank shells with incredible speed. It's actually the slowest weapon to reload in the game if you're doing it alone, and the fastest if you're doing it with a friend.
That's awesome.
So, so there's a lot of ways throughout the game that it encourages that. And there's one kind of more thing that I thought was pretty cool is that it makes it very easy for you to get someone to jump into your game from the web. There's a stratagem that lets you call in people from outside the game. It's a little SOS that's going to basically bump you up in the list of people who are waiting for people to join their game. And people are going to want to join your game. And the reason for that is that at the higher levels as you go, all the different rewards, the experience points that you get, and the research points, which are you pick up little samples around the map to build up research points to upgrade your gear. All of those encourage you more to join games in progress than they do to make you start your own game. If you're starting your own game early on, you can pick, okay, I want to go to this system because it has this reward that's really good. I want this reward. But you're not always going to be able to find the reward that you want, the stratagem that you're going to unlock, by just picking from the galactic map. Maybe you want to fight a certain kind of enemy. Well, maybe that enemy doesn't offer the right kind of reward for you. So maybe then you're going to go onto the other ships and identify games that are already in progress. So throughout, anytime, if you summon this SOS stratagem, you're getting kicked up that list, and you're very likely, I have found, to get someone to drop into your game, and that person is dropping into your game probably for whatever reward you're getting, or because you're getting a lot of research points. It doesn't really matter, because as long as you're there together, it makes you work together in a really good way.
This is something that really contrasts with a lot of other online games. Many online games that I've played, there's this really big barrier to joining other people. You don't want to join other people's games because, first off, you don't know where they're at, what they're doing. Also, they might be at a different level than you are. And just as an example, I've been playing a fair amount of Destiny. Not a lot, but I've been dropping into it every now and then and playing a little bit of it. I have 3 friends who are also playing Destiny, maybe more actually. I would love to play Destiny with them, but so far I have been completely unable to do so because I got Destiny 3 weeks later than most of my friends did. And because of that, and also because I just haven't devoted a huge amount of time to it, I have been below them in level. And even if I were on the same level, I might have a different collection of DLC, or there's other barriers as well. And it makes it just really difficult to join your friends, but it also kind of inhibits you from joining other people too. This game does away with all of that. First off, just having a warm body to join you, even if they're way below your level, is still a huge help because they can reinforce you. Even if all they're doing is shooting a third of the enemies that you are and dying twice as much, they're still there so that if you die, you're gonna get reinforced. It's better than nothing.
Absolutely. They're even in a game where it's chaotic and they're probably going to kill you, it's still usually more fun to have them around. And as you get into the kind of progression and the leveling up, what you want out of the game actually changes in such a way that the high-level players are incentivized to play with lower-level players and to help those players succeed. So that's something I think is really cool. So when you get into higher levels, it takes more and more experience points to level up. Leveling up is great. You get a new gun, you get a bunch of research points to level up your stratagems, you get all kinds of stuff. But it's also, as those get more and more spaced out, what you're really wanting is those research points. And the research points are generated by picking up the samples all around the map. Because those are going to let you upgrade the different stratagems that you have. When you upgrade the stratagems get much better. So their cooldown time decreases, and they get new powers. They get more powerful. Like if you've got a stratagem that summons a gun, it's going to get a bigger magazine, and it's going to get more damage. And it's going to, sometimes get a new kind of damage, like armor piercing. It's satisfying to upgrade those.
So in summary, if you're a low-level player, you're going to be kind of grinding for XP to level up your character. But if you're a high-level player, you probably mostly need research points in order to level up your stratagems. But the way those are distributed, a high-level player joining a low-level player can earn just as many research points as they could playing with other high-level players on a much more difficult map.
They can actually earn faster because they can get around that low-level map with no problem at all.
Right.
So, and it still doesn't feel for that low-level player. Like, for me, when I was low-level, it felt great to have these high-level players dropping into my game and backing me up, because
it's still challenging.
Yeah, it's still challenging. It's still fun, and
still dying all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things that I think that is the thing that I think makes this game, is that it's very perfectly balanced to incentivize everyone to have a good time together.
Yeah, no matter whether you're a high-level player playing with other high-level players, a high-level player playing with low-level players, or the reverse, all of those work together because there's always something cool that you're getting.
The only thing that can really screw you is somebody who is a total tool.
Yeah, like an active jackass.
A total active jackass. And even in those situations, they can't screw you up that badly.
Yeah, because it's very easy for you to kill them. And if you do, you can just not reinforce them for a while.
Yeah, I've had situations where I accidentally blew someone away a couple of times, and they just didn't reinforce me for a while, and I was like, okay, I guess you want a timeout. All right. And eventually they brought me back because they needed some help. Maybe I just take a quick break.
You can boot people, but I've never had to do it.
Yeah, I've never had to do it either. Yeah, you can also commend people. I don't think that it doesn't really seem to have any gameplay significance, except it pops up on their screen, makes them feel good, and I presume has something to do with matchmaking.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So I think if you are commended, there's a ranking. Something shows on your little player profile saying what sort of standing you're in, and I've always been neutral. Even though I toss out a lot of commendations to people. So, I don't know.
I've had a ton of fun playing this game, but I've mostly been playing it with you, Shane, so I'm a little behind you in levels. But what's been really neat about that is you and Julia have been playing this together quite a bit, and because this offers same-screen co-op both in person and over the internet, I can drop in to a game already in progress that you guys are playing. And you guys are playing on a TV, and I'm playing on, my TV or even on my portable, this. Okay, so we didn't mention what platforms this is on. This is available on the PlayStation 4. This is on the PS3 and also on the PS Vita. And it's cross-buy, cross-play, and cross-save in their terminology, which means that you can buy this game for $20, and you can play it on your PS4, your PS3, or your PlayStation Vita, and play against anybody on any of those platforms and get basically the exact same experience. And what that's meant is that Shane and his wife Julia could be playing this game on their PlayStation 4 together in Houston, and I could be on my Vita in the Bay Area and drop into their game and play alongside them.
Yeah, and that's worked out really nicely. I've back to the idea of the incentives. That actually really helps the lower level player as well. I don't think I mentioned that you're getting the experience for any of the kind of the low level players are really wanting experience points, and they're getting those as objectives are completed. And at a higher difficulty level, those objectives are much more valuable. So for you as a low level player to jump into my higher level game, it really accelerates.
Yeah.
So if you're a level 1 and you jump into a game with a level 15 and you play at a harder difficulty level than you could tackle on your own, you're very likely to level up.
Yeah, totally accelerated getting started with the game a lot. And it never feels like you're a drag on other people or lagging behind them, because it really does a great job of that balance.
Mm-hmm.
But you play online a great deal more than I do against.
I always play this game online. I basically never play it alone. I have definitely had games where I will summon the SOS and nobody shows up. Usually it seems to me that is in the games where I'm doing really shitty. Or where I've tackled something that's above my difficulty level. And if that's something that I'm seeing, I'll try and drop into somebody else's game. But it's surprisingly easy to, if you're playing on a level where you're actually progressing, to summon somebody and have somebody else who wants to play alongside you. And they're going to have kitted themselves out in a very different way. You'll see probably some stratagems that you haven't played around with. And you'll kind of see if your different strategies work together. And it can be really, really fun.
Yeah. Any stories from the war?
Well, most of the fun times that I've had, the things that are really memorable are Helldives that just went totally wrong. So a couple of things have been really memorable. One, there was one time where my wife and I were sitting side by side on the couch with this one guy who he had his microphone turned on and he was talking, but neither of us had our microphones on.
I never use a mic with this game.
So yeah, I rarely use a mic unless I'm playing.
Which, as a side note, shows that this game, like, it's a multiplayer game where you can cooperate without actually communicating.
Yeah, so I actually do use there's some yes and a no and there's a wait and a go.
Yeah.
Emotes, and I use those a lot because it's an effective way to communicate. Stay and wait is the most important thing you can say in this game.
Yeah.
Or go, move and you point. But everything else is pretty optional. So my wife and I got into this game with this guy who was just being like, he was just a little bit quick to be irritated with us when we screwed up, right? He was way higher level than us. And he was a little bit exasperated with our play, right? And we waited. I think we just sort of. I told my wife, "Okay, just stand still for a second." Because he had just started shooting us and like tackling objectives without us. And so I was like, "Okay, wait for us to reinforce." Okay, all right. And as soon as we came back, I told Julia and I stood there and spun. You can do like a little cape spin. If you spin the character around really fast, your cape kind of flies out behind you.
There's actually a trophy for that.
There is a trophy for spinning like crazy on the ship. But we did get that one. But we spun like crazy right there in the middle of a forest. And we waited until that guy started spinning. And the second he started spinning, we just unloaded on him and killed him, and then completed the whole rest of the mission without him. It was hilarious. It was wonderful. Because that guy was like, he was taking pot shots at us back and forth. So even that can be really fun. That's a one-time thing. That was like the one time that I got into kind of a confrontation. It was hilarious the way it played out. But things go crazy in this game all the time. The other thing that I found really fun is when they do have events, and they occasionally have they have two kinds of events. They have an event when an enemy is pushed all the way back to their homeworld. They've got a special kind of mission for taking over a homeworld. And they've got another kind of event if that enemy pushes all the way back to Super Earth. So some of my favorite missions have been ones where I was part of kind of the community taking over one of these enemy homeworlds, because these missions look look and feel a lot different. The missions are kind of fun. Like, we haven't talked that much about the variety of the different objectives. There's a ton of different objectives, and they've added more for this new update. And there's objectives that are specific to a particular enemy. So the variety of the enemies, the variety of the objectives is fun. And you get kind of a fun special bonus when you are either taking on an enemy at your home world, or
Super
theirs.
Earth.
Whether you're defending Super Earth or spreading managed democracy, you're going to wind up with a really great event. And those events are really fun.
I haven't gotten a chance to participate in any of those yet. I'm really looking forward to it. But within the regular missions, there is a lot of variety, even though it's all, look down from above and shoot things with a variety of guns. The objectives are pretty varied. There's a lot of little stuff like go and pick up an object from this point on the map and deliver it to this point on the map, or defend this area from hordes of attacking bugs or whatever, or get these survivors, which are it's sort of an escort mission. But you do it.
Well, that's another thing. Like, if you've got those annoying escort missions, which I generally
there's just a
hate.
few of them.
Yeah, there's a few of them, and if you fail them, you can still complete the overall mission. You just don't get the experience points. So it's not punishing you heavily if you just unload your shotgun on the survivors and move on to the next objective.
Yeah, you each of the worlds that you land on will usually have between 2 and 5 objectives that you have to complete.
Yeah, you got to decide on a path between them.
It's
but
great
that's
to
getting
give
into strategy. I'm honestly not. If you want to talk strategy about this game, and for that matter, if you want to get in on one of those big events that happen from time to time, because they can happen kind of any time throughout the week. They basically last all day when they do happen, from what I've found. But you might want to get onto the subreddit for this game.
Oh, yeah.
I actually really suggest that. They talk a lot about strategy and about the different stratagems. We haven't talked about the different DLC. And that's kind of the most controversial aspect of this game. There's $20 for the base game, and when you buy the base game, you get one of the kind of unit expansions for free, it seems like. When I bought it, that free unit expansion was the Ranger, and I had a lot of fun playing with those little stratagems, and it basically is getting you on top of the base game, which includes lots of guns, lots of stratagems, lots of fun toys to play with. They sell these different packs that are these different kind of play styles or different characters, and those are about $3 on the PlayStation Network.
Yeah.
So you spent $20 on the game, and if that's all you spend, that's a great price for a game. And this is a game where you could have a whole hell of a lot of fun without spending any more money. They do offer downloadable packs that include 2 different kinds of downloadable packs. One is an individual unit type, and that unit type is going to be something like the Commando, who has a new gun that you might want to play with, maybe 1 or 2 cool new guns, some new stratagems, and I don't know, some new cosmetic stuff like a cape and a new helmet and a new armor type.
Yeah, which the cosmetic stuff is almost ridiculous because you can barely see that stuff.
Yeah, you can barely see it
perspective from the game anyway. But
my
whatever.
coolest cape is not one of the ones that I got from these content packs. I have, by the way, bought every one of these content packs because I really like this game, even though I use very little of that stuff. The main reason I've bought it is that I want to have, when you buy it, you get it immediately instead of picking it up with experience points. And I wanted my wife and I to have the most options in terms of what kind of stratagems and stuff we could have. And she's picked up a few of those free stratagems and used those.
Yeah.
But they also sell those as kind of a combo pack with 3 of them in there. They're not necessary.
Yeah, the key thing here is you don't really need to buy the DLC. It will give you some additional options if you're deciding on like a build for your character. And that's something that, there's strategy involved, but there's also just personal preference. I like this gun, I like that gun. You won't be at a disadvantage. It's all co-op, so you're not going to be like left out if you don't have the right stuff.
Yeah, if you're a good player, you're way more fun to play with than if you're you're going to be able to have a lot more fun yourself, and you'll be more fun to play with than if you're a player who's bought all the DLC. It's no big deal.
Yeah,
you can only bring 4 stratagems into combat with you anyway.
Yeah, my perspective on it is the DLC is pretty fair, and I was happy to give them my extra money when I found out how much fun I was having with the game. But you can buy this game for $20 on the PSN. It's cross-buy, like I said, and all the DLC is as well. So if you buy it, you can play it on your PlayStation 4, your PlayStation 3 if you have one, your Vita, whatever. I wish this game was out on more platforms. Magika has been cross-platform with, like, it's on both the... I don't remember what all platforms it's on, but it's on the PC, it's on consoles. Magika 2, which is coming out soon, I think, is doing the same. But Helldivers is a PlayStation exclusive. Yeah. So it's only on PlayStation platforms, but it's on all the PlayStation platforms. And if you have any PlayStation platform, PS3, PS4, or PS Vita, this is a game that is completely worth picking up. And I would say, having played quite a few games on the Vita after having gotten one just recently, so far, this is probably the most polished, cool online experience that the Vita has to offer.
Absolutely. I'm almost pondering buying a Vita because of this game, which is ridiculous that I might want to buy a $100 console to play a $20 game. But maybe that's not. Maybe that's not ridiculous.
Yeah. So, is that it?
I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about this game. I would love to get anybody online and play with it.
Listen,
shout out to our listeners. If you want to add me on the PSN, I'd much rather play with you than with random internet strangers.
Yeah,
but,
I would totally love to play this game against anybody. And so if you...
That's great. That's the best thing to say about this game is I would like to play this game with anybody. Yeah. You and I sat down and played this together, and we got matched up with someone who was like... Sounded like he was
7 years old. Yeah.
He was like a kid, but it was still fun to play with him.
Yeah. And actually, we had more fun because he was talking into his mic, and hearing a shit-talking 7-year-old was hilarious.
Yeah, and he stayed on for a little while, but that's the kind of memorable experiences that I like in this game. It's just fun no matter who you're playing with.
They just can't fuck it up for you.
They can, but even then.
even then
it's not that bad.
Yeah, so thanks to Arrowhead Games for making this game. I think it's probably the finest dual-stick shooter of the current generation of games. And don't miss it. It's $20. It's something that I think a lot of people have overlooked because it's exclusive to PlayStation, and it's downloadable only, and it's this kind of weird genre that maybe not a lot of folks are into. But if you have ever enjoyed a dual-stick shooter, you'll probably enjoy this one. And even if you've never enjoyed a dual-stick shooter, you might want to give this one a try. I think it's one of the most interesting, balanced online games I've ever had the opportunity to play. So definitely give it a try. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. Shane, where can people find you on the internet?
As always, I can be found at 8BitShane on Twitter and a variety of other social media platforms.
And I am at Raygan K, that's RAYGANK. And of course, you can follow our show on Twitter. We are at _shortgame. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes or leave us a review there. And I volunteered Shane for something on our last episode. This is a limited time offer. We may stop doing this at any time, but if you, listener, leave us a review on iTunes
while supplies last, if you leave us a review on iTunes and send us a screenshot so we know it's you, I will create a Dungeons and Dragons character for you because I am prepping a special project
of you.
For or of you. I think it's great to imagine what people might be in a world of fantasy.
Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition character sheet, custom made for you by our local dungeon master Shane.
Yes.
He's a professional. So please do that, and also catch us next week on another episode of The Short Game.